So let's talk about a conflict that had no direct fighting between the two main rivals, but, and this is a huge but, it brought the entire world right to the edge of total annihilation. We're going to break down the decades-long global staring contest that pretty much shaped the world we're all living in today, the Cold War. All right, so where do we even begin? Well, to really get the Cold War, you gotta rewind the clock right back to the moment World War II ended, because it was right there, in the ashes of that massive global conflict, that the seeds of a totally new and different kind of rivalry were planted. So who exactly are we talking about here? Who were these former friends who suddenly became bitter rivals? You see, this whole decades-long standoff was really all about two main players who, and this is the ironic part, had just finished fighting on the exact same side against a common enemy. Yeah, you can almost think of them like two superheroes, the United States and the Soviet Union. They teamed up, they beat the bad guy, but when the dust settled, they looked around and realized they had completely different ideas about how to rebuild the world. And that one huge disagreement would go on to shape the next 50 years of history. So what was this big disagreement, this thing that split them apart? Well, it went way deeper than just arguing over maps or territory. This was about two completely different blueprints for how an entire society should actually work. And this really gets to the heart of it. On one side, you had the US vision. They were pushing for capitalism, individual freedom, open markets. Think of a busy street with tons of different shops, all competing. And on the other side, you had the Soviet Union's vision, communism, a system where the state controls pretty much everything, all in the name of equality for all. Kind of like one giant government-run store for everybody. And here is the real kicker. This wasn't just some friendly debate. Each side was absolutely convinced that their way was the right way, the only way. And they were both genuinely terrified that the other was on a mission to spread their influence across the globe and basically destroy their entire way of life. That mutual fear, that deep, deep distrust, that's the fuel that powered this entire conflict. So, as you can imagine, this intense rivalry led to a completely new kind of war. One that didn't really follow any of the old rules. Right. So they made a very conscious choice to avoid a direct head-to-head fight. Why? Well, because with both superpowers armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons, a hot war was it was unthinkable. The consequences for the entire planet would have been absolutely catastrophic. So the battlefield completely shifted. It became a war of ideas, with each side using propaganda to try and win over the world. It became a war fought in the shadows, with spies and covert operations, and of course, it was this incredible technological race, with the most famous part being the space race, that mad dash to see who could conquer the final frontier first. At the end of the day, this was a massive global competition for influence. It was an arms race to build bigger, scarier weapons to keep the other side in check. It was a diplomatic race to get more countries to join your team. And it was a constant effort in science, in culture, in sports to prove to the rest of the world, hey, our system works better. And this intense staring contest, this incredible test of wills, it wasn't just contained to Washington and Moscow. No, it played out on a global stage. It basically turned the entire planet into a giant chessboard for these two superpowers. You saw these flashpoints pop up everywhere. From the divided city of Berlin to the heart-stopping missile crisis in Cuba. You saw them fighting proxy wars in places like Korea, where they backed opposing sides. And like we said, even the race to the moon and beyond was just another front in this massive global struggle. Just let that sink in for a second. Over 40 years. This incredibly tense, nerve-wracking standoff lasted for more than a generation. It wasn't just some short crisis. It was the reality that millions of people grew up with, always living under the shadow of this global rivalry. So that leads to a really important question. If you have all these proxy wars and arms races and this constant tension, why on earth do we call it the Cold War? The keywords here are direct and large scale. See, while they were definitely involved in conflicts all over the world, American and Soviet soldiers never actually fired on each other in a major battle. The war stayed cold for one simple reason. The two main rivals never let it get hot. But let's be clear, cold did not mean calm. Not at all. The tension was so thick, the constant underlying threat of a nuclear war was so real that it felt like it could freeze the entire world solid in a single, terrifying moment. It was basically a kind of peace that was held together only by fear. And really, that's the thing to take away from all this. Even though the Cold War is officially over, its legacy is everywhere. That decades-long staring contest completely reshaped our world in ways we're still trying to understand. Which leaves us with a really big question to think about. The contest might be over, but even today, has the world gotten any closer to agreeing on what peace and progress should actually look like?